We have now, all of us by now have heard the decision of the International Court of Justice. Can you elaborate for us on the ruling of the court?
Thank you very much. A convenient place to begin is perhaps to repeat and adopt the sentiments expressed by His Excellency the President in his statement on the matter, as that remains the official statement of the Government of Guyana. Speaking for myself, I am not surprised at the ruling. As a government, we did not take this decision lightly to approach the court for the interim measures. We cogitated upon this matter maturely and soberly, and of course, we acted upon the advice of our competent team of lawyers. There is always a risk when one approaches a court of losing, and we had to weigh that risk very seriously. But in the end, we were persuaded that going to court was one of the options, and perhaps the best option for Guyana at this point in time, faced with the referendum that Venezuela was proceeding with, and faced with the public rhetoric that came from the top leaders of that country. So we went to the court convinced that the rule of law and justice will prevail. We remain convinced that our case is unassailable, that international law is on our side, that justice and diplomacy are on our side, and the international community stands with us. We have been vindicated. The rule of law has prevailed, justice has prevailed. The court, in a very reasoned and clearly expressed judgment, made some very seminal points in granting the reliefs sought. They made the powerful statement that the decision is unanimous, and they made the statement that it is binding on the two parties. The court found that we satisfied all the requirements for the interim measures to be granted, and the court recited those requirements. Importantly, the court found that apart from the fact and in law that we have a plausible case at the prima facie level, the court found that the court's process and the integrity of the proceedings before the court are in jeopardy by the actions taken by Venezuela, and perhaps most importantly, that Guyana and the case itself stand to suffer irreparable prejudice as a result of the impending actions of Venezuela and its government officials, as well as their public utterances that were clearly threatening not only the jurisdiction of the court, not only the sanctity of the legal proceedings, but were threatening to take physical action that will infringe upon the territorial integrity of 5/8 of Guyana's lawful territory. Against that backdrop, the court granted a number of interim measures. In fact, the court made it clear that it was going beyond what Guyana was seeking in order to preserve the status quo. In short, Venezuela is to take no action whatsoever in respect of certain questions on that referendum. More particularly, Venezuela is prohibited from taking any actions that would interfere with Guyana's territorial sovereignty and integrity, and perhaps most significantly, that the status quo shall prevail, meaning that the disputed territory that is currently under the dominion and lawful possession and forms part of Guyana's territory shall continue to remain intact until the substantive matter is heard and determined. I believe those are the main ingredients of the case, of the ruling, and of course we welcome that, and we believe that it puts us in good stead going forward on this border controversy. We harbor no illusions that this will disappear, but this ruling has put us in a much more formidable position than we were in prior to its delivery.
Thank you, Honorable Attorney General, for elaborating on the ruling. And now that this decision is in Guyana's favor, what are some of the consequences if Venezuela refuses to comply with this decision?
Well, as I alluded to earlier, the court made it plain, I believe, on more than one occasion during the decision, that the decision is unanimous and that it is binding. I believe that those points were carefully and deliberately made and emphasized by the court. The court, throughout the ruling, emphasized also that Venezuela is subject to its jurisdiction. The court pointed to provisions of the court statutes itself, as well as articles of the Charter of the United Nations, to reinforce the point that there is a duty in law to comply with the edict of the court. What happens if Venezuela refuses to do so? First of all, it would be a travesty of justice if Venezuela decides to travel that road. But that's a matter for Venezuela. What it will establish, however, is that one member state, who is not only a member of the United Nations and not only subject to United Nations protocols, organizations, and of course the ICJ, but that member is also before the ICJ, and the ICJ has assumed jurisdiction. Against that backdrop, if Venezuela as a litigant and as a member of the UN chooses to violate all those protocols, the Charter of the UN, and more fundamentally, the orders of the International Court of Justice, then Venezuela is signaling to the world that it is prepared to depart from the League of Civilized Nations. It is prepared to trample upon international law. It is prepared to threaten and undermine and subvert the international legal order of the world. Now, though one has to be in a particular state of mind for one to run the risk of moving in that direction. As I've said elsewhere, I cannot imagine that the court, having expressed its views so clearly and so emphatically, will sit idly by, and the international community will sit idly by and allow a violation of the court's orders. We continue to appeal to the international community to stand by our side. We continue to be committed to a lawful process. We are committed to international law, and we continue to expect the type of support that we have received across this hemisphere. And as the need arises for greater support and more active support, we will continue to do everything possible to ensure that we garner that support. Our military remains intact because we can't rule out any possibility. But I believe that now, with a court order or court orders on our side, I believe that we are in a far better place than we were prior to the grant of these orders. And I leave it there for the time being.
Thank you, Attorney General, for highlighting the consequences of Venezuela violating the orders of the court. However, can you tell us what is next for the ordinary Guyanese? Should we be worried?
Well, first of all, I wish to take the opportunity to register our deep gratitude to the people of Guyana and to all the agencies of state that have stood with unity on this matter. To thank, of course, all those outside of Guyana, the international community, for their solidarity and support, and to thank our legal team for an excellent work done. We have asked the population to remain optimistic. We have always said from the beginning that we are on the side of justice. We are on the righteous side, and justice, righteousness, and the law will prevail. Again, we have been vindicated, and we continue to ask the people to remain calm. While there is great reason to celebrate, we must be measured in whatever celebrations we embark upon. We must appreciate that this issue is not over. We must continue to exercise great maturity. We must continue to remain magnanimous, and we must continue to work with the government as the government explores every possibility of bringing not only this matter to a lawful and conclusive resolution, but as the government continues to ensure that our territory remains safe and our people remain safe.